Directed and co-written by Pablo Lorchin, we are talking Hooked Up. And this is a 2013 found footage movie, apparently all filmed on an iPhone. And it tells the story of two American friends going to Barcelona to sow their oats, so to speak. And one of them is a more sensitive type, just broken up with his girlfriend. Another one is a little bit more rambunctious, you might say. So the pair of them head to Barcelona, going to chat with the local girls, and eventually they meet a couple of girls and go back to one of their houses, which seems to be this large, old-fashioned house, and you know, start to get down to business, so to speak. However, soon things take a turn for the worst, as this one of the girls may be holding a secret and be into some darker things, shall we say. Now, what will happen, you will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's talk about Hooked Up. The whole iPhone thing is really just a thing to put on the poster, to be honest with you. I don't think it really makes a difference to the film, if we're being completely honest with you. What works in this movie? It's relatively bloody once it gets going. It's not, I wouldn't say necessarily gory, but there's a fair amount of bloodshed and blood splatter, people getting covered in blood and things like that. So it does have a violent and somewhat kind of brutal elements to the film. I think the location shooting is pretty solid. This kind of old Spanish style house, which seems to be huge and have many doors, a suitable place to get kind of trapped in there, and they've done a good job with the set decoration. All of the windows seem to be sort of hammered shut and got barbed wire over them to prevent people from leaving, obviously hinting that there may be something a little going on here. And then we find various other artifacts around this house which suggest that there's been some darker things going on at this residence, you might say. So yeah, the set design, the set dressing, I think is all pretty good. You know, it goes, once the film gets going, I mean, it takes a little bit of time to get going, but you know, we just try to establish the characters. You know, there's lots of kind of running around and kind of frantic pace and panic. And I will say that there are elements here where I do feel the characters seem genuinely panicked, which is, you know, a positive, because I do find sometimes with horror films, depictions of fear are often subdued, or the Hollywood version of what people would in these situations would really be like. But I think in this one they did do a good job of having people just blind panic, basically, and just act irrationally, which is what I think probably people would do. But I have to be honest with you, I found this movie as somewhat of a bore, to be honest. It's a very generic found footage movie. The conceit here is, oh, it's filmed all on an iPhone. Brilliant. It doesn't affect the story. It doesn't affect the actual contents of the actual production. It's a very generic, vanilla found footage movie. But I do think there are some things that I think detract from it even further and outside of the story. Number one, our two characters, I have to be honest with you, are a little bit unlikable. Especially one of them, who is the more kind of like the hornier of the two, shall we say. They're just like the kind of the awful bro dudes who all they think about is just sex and stuff like that, and it's just very sort of abrasive, you know, typical American abroad sort of stereotypes where they're disrespectful to other cultures and things like that, and just being, you know, rude, abrasive, you know, loud and all that. And they're just like not particularly people who you want to follow and root for. So the movie has decided to go for this kind of this route, which I guess on some level there are people like that, certainly, and I think that's fair to say that there's a good chance that people will be going on holidays and doing this sort of thing. So maybe it's somewhat of a realistic depiction of maybe people, but it doesn't make for characters who you necessarily want to follow and root for. There are times here where I thought the acting was cheesy, and I think with a found footage film, it's kind of very much needs to be a real experience. Now we know that obviously the footage isn't real, but nonetheless, it has to be believable, and I think the acting is a little wonky from time to time. There's also some kind of music overlays and things like that, which I didn't think really work in sort of the found footage genre, because it's kind of, you're just trying to take the elements that work from a normal film and plonk it into a found footage, and it doesn't really necessarily work. I've seen some critiques that the movie takes a while to get going. I necessarily wouldn't say that. I do think you need an element of character building and establishment of the characters, but yeah, it's a little kind of dull in the first act, maybe getting to know our characters, but I think it is largely typical of what happens in these sort of films. The actual horror elements of it, as I say, they're relatively bloody, but it's nothing to write home about what's actually kind of going on, this kind of antagonistic force. It's nothing particularly special, and nothing particularly sort of scary, and it even borders on silly a little bit at times. So, you know, there's kind of, you don't really ever really feel a sense of dread or tension or anything like that. And this is one of these films which, you know, typically happens in found footage films. There's lots of arguing, lots of shouting, and you know, it's like a wall of noise sometimes. You're just listening to people shout over each other, and I get, you know, tensions are high, and there is that sense of panic, which I do appreciate. But it, you know, we don't need to film a whole like 10 minutes of it. You know, we can get that people are panicked. They may have turned the camera off if this was sort of a real situation, and then we can kind of go back to maybe people planning a way out, or something like that. But we just get like, you know, a good third or quarter or a third of this movie is these two guys shouting over each other, and we already don't really think they're particularly relatable characters, and then we just have this constant arguing and inflated drama that often is so in these movies. So many times, oh look, there's some type of personal thing that will rear its head because we need to kind of pad out the drama, because obviously the actual content of the horror isn't enough, so we need to find reasons to have inflated drama between these characters, and that's exactly what happens in this movie. So overall, I have to be honest, I thought this movie was rather a miss. I didn't think it was particularly interesting. The threat wasn't particularly interesting. The characters were somewhat poorly acted and unlikable. So it's a 3 out of 10 for me, folks. Have you seen it? What were your thoughts on this one? Please do let me know, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.